Hello and welcome to Blood and Ashes, a Wheel of Time spoiler cast. I am Moritz and I'm joined by my two good friends Jody
Hello, sir.
and Villy.
Good evening.
I decided to introduce myself there for the first time. I realized a couple of days ago that I've never introduced myself. I mean, you guys call me by my name, but I've never said it out loud. So there we go. My name is Moritz.
It's just because you have contempt for all our listeners.
Okay. Okay, guys. So now we are entering, or we have entered in this batch of chapters. We've pretty much hit the middle of book one. And I was curious to know, how do you guys feel about the reread? Is it what you expected it to be? Is there anything different? Does anything stand out to you overall? I know I certainly have some thoughts. How about you, Vil?
10 times better. There's 10 times more to absorb because you know so much more.
Totally agreed. I mean, we've said it 1,000 times, right? We're picking up on the smallest little things, and it is delectable every time. You know, it is strewn with tasty morsels of foreshadowing and prophecy. It's really great. I'm loving it.
Strewn with tasty morsels, indeed. I'm really enjoying this, and like you guys say, like the details that I'd never picked up on. It's like I'm reading this for the first time. Like I know everybody, and I know all the characters, and I know how I feel about them, and how I remember them so fondly, and so much detail that I'd never expected before. And 50% in. I'm reading it on the Kindle, so I'm seeing like, oh, we're halfway through, and it's 5 hours left. So this is a 10-hour book. If you put your head down and read, you can finish it in 10 hours.
I feel like we're going through it really quickly. Like I feel even not just the pace of actually getting through the pages, but I feel like the story is just racing along.
I haven't found a chapter where I've gone like, oh, geez, come on, like get on with it,
No, not a single one. We've read half of the book, and everything I'm reading now is what in my head canon I still have as like the very beginning of the story. Now, obviously, there are 14 or however many books, and we are still halfway through the first book. But I mean, I have a pretty set idea of what the first book's story is in my head, and I feel like we're still, in the beginning of the journey. But they're motoring along, and we're eyeballing the last chapters already.
This for me at the moment is really around the first time I was very much chasing the story. What's going to happen to Rand? So focused around their actions and their in the moment sort of story. Where now I'm I know that. I remember that. I want to see the little bits that I don't know, or that little Easter eggs that's hidden in the text, and the little prophecies and the little bit of text here and there that you kind of like reading it the first time, you kind of skim over it because you don't really understand it. So a lot of it goes by the wayside because it's a prophecy and I know none of these words. And back then the internet wasn't a thing that you could jump on and type in, what does this mean? No such luxury.
Yeah, totally. I also find that I think I've actually said this in a previous chapter. I'm sort of paying more attention to the descriptions of the scenery and like the weather and that sort of stuff. And it is definitely different from what I remember picturing the first couple goes. Like the starkness of the landscape. Now I'm really, really noticing when they're talking about how bare the trees are, and I'm trying to picture that in my head, not just the generic fantasy forest settings that I've been conditioned to picture, but like really picturing a lot of like these copses of trees with like no leaves on them, and everything is stark, and the grass is dry and it's cold, and like we said, there's snow drifts everywhere. Like it's a different image in my mind than what I had the first time around, and I'm loving it. I mean, that makes it fresh.
Like the winds blowing over. Everybody's constantly tugging at their cloaks and their coats, and it's cold.
Yes,
constantly, and that's something I don't remember picking up on, at least.
No.
Yeah, well, it was pouring rain here while I was reading today, and it has been bitterly cold for the last couple of days. So I've been tugging as well at my coat and my blanket.
Joe, you are safe in Spain, but we are copping it in Oz. It is frosty.
Today's our first fresh day. It's been 34 degrees, constant berg winds. It's been fucking hell. It's not been fun. Not at all. Close the windows, put on the aircon. Not going outside.
I'll trade you in a second. Okay. So last time we ended off with the chapter called Wolf Brother, where Perrin and Egwene met our friend Elyas. And this week we are doing chapters 24 to 29, starting with Flight Down the Arenal and ending with Eyes Without Pity. I'll get us started with chapter 24, Flight Down the Arenal. You guys ready to roll?
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Okay, so we start the chapter with Rand, who is sitting on a platform that matches a whole bunch of stone-topped spires and platforms around him, all connected with these railless walkways and crisscrossing to different spires. But he can't see the base of any of these spires, and immediately you get the sense. I mean, when we left him, he was on a boat, nowhere near anything like this. Immediately, you know, this is some kind of dream space or dreamscape of some kind. And he's sort of cowering away, and he looks over to one of these little walkways, and he sees Belzamon like striding along, sort of looking side to side, looking for him. Which is probably some kind of metaphorical representation of, you know, Ishmael actually looking for him in the real world. And he comments that when he thinks about the fact that this is a dream, everything sort of blurs around him and goes fuzzy. And when he does that, it happens. And he finds himself suddenly in a maze of thorn bushes, and he's got these really, really razor-sharp thorns on all the bushes around him. And as he brings his hand nearer to one to actually feel it, he ends up pricking his finger, despite actively trying not to. And he's looking around, and the place is pretty grim. I mean, it's got these sort of like polished stones in the floor, and they turn out to be like human skulls. And he figures, okay, cool, well, you know, there's all these gateways I can go through. Let me turn down this one. And as he does, he pretty much walks into Belzamon, or Ishmael, standing right in front of him. And he focuses on the fact that it is a dream again, and Belzamon sort of has this look of surprise on his face. And everything shifts again. And he finds himself surrounded by all these mirrors, just like thousands and thousands of mirrors around him. And as he's looking around, he sees like all these images of himself. And then he starts seeing images of Belzamon as well. Also, again, looking around, walking around, and he can see all these different images. And when he looks straight on at one of the mirrors, they mention that he sees his own face. He sees Belzamon's face. He sees only one face. Sort of implying that it's the same face. We'll circle back to that at the end of this chapter description, because I'm going to prep Villy for a pretty serious story spoiler before we delve into that. And then we get back to Rand, and he's sort of just on the ship again with Matt and with Thom. And then we start reading about how, you know, they're busy making their way down the river. Rand also, when he woke up, his thumb was actually bleeding from where he pricked himself with a thorn. Sort of hinting at all the I'm not going to say the dream world's name yet. That is a trap that I'm bound to step in. But I mean, that whole concept of them being able to shift reality, and, you know, like what happens in the world of dreams happens in the real world. It's obvious to people that are rereading the story that was happening in okay, let me take a crack at it. Tell Alan Riyadh.
Close enough.
Close enough.
I might be completely wrong, and you could be right.
Well, I'm going to make you pronounce it next time.
Right.
And then, so they're on the boat, and they're on Belzamon's boat, busy making its way down the Arenal, hence the name of the chapter. And you can see that Thom is sort of keeping the crew entertained with all of his various Gleeman skills. But Florin Gelb, the guy that Rand stepped on, that sort of bungled the night watch when the guys got on the boat when they were chased by the Trollocs, he's trying to stir shit. You know, he's going up to all the other sailors, and he's, you know, saying, "Oh, these guys brought the Trollocs on us," but the sailors just don't want anything to do with him because they actually dislike him more than they dislike the guys that are on the boat. But what they do notice is that the crewmen are sort of starting to huddle together and speak in hushed tones and that sort of thing. And what's interesting is that Thom, instead of going and, you know, slapping backs and telling stories and making jovial sort of
Chit-chat.
distractions for the chit chat for the crew, he sort of is lighting his pipe and lingering near them and that sort of thing. And I think you start seeing here the beginnings of Thom's sort of information gathering skills. Later in the story, he becomes, one of the basically the spies. Him and was the thief taker's name? I forget his name. They used to go into all the inns and go collect information and come back. And Thom is already busy doing that here. And Rand mentions that, we should keep an eye on Gelb, and Thom says, don't worry, Gelb is not going to be your problem. If there's going to be a problem, it's going to be from the rest of the sailors, because he can smell sort of mutiny in the air, or at least he alludes to it. And when Rand says to Matt, we can't trust Gelb, Matt, his response is, can we trust any of them, really? Already acting paranoid and obviously affected by this dagger that he's carrying from Shadow Logoth. And Rand just notices, he notes the fact that, Matt's been brooding ever since they left Shadow Logoth. Thom continues to teach the boys, flute and tumbling, and the crew get a lot of enjoyment out of that, because obviously the boys suck at all this stuff. And then on the trip, Rand is also often just, sort of staring off the side of the boat, looking at the bank, seeing if, you can see any of their friends, and he notices a strange metal tower. And Bail Domin notices them talking about it, like Matt's also looking at it, and Bail comes over and he tells them about this tower that looks like, when you're up close to it, all the boat captains along the river, they use it for navigational purposes and stuff, but he's been up to it and he says it looks like shining steel, but there's no opening in it. No one's ever been inside. No one knows what is there. And Matt immediately thinks, obviously it's treasure. But you can tell that Bail, when he's talking about it, he quickly gets drawn into this conversation about this weird and wonderful thing. And then he starts elaborating about, like, what's gonna get you excited about adventuring and stuff. It's not going to be the treasure. It's going to be all the weird things that you see. And he lists a couple. So I'm gonna read them off quick, because I took notes.
Lay
of
it
all
on
of them.
us.
So he talks about in Tremelking, whatever that place is called. He talks about a 50-foot stone hand holding a crystal ball. Now, we know what that is, right? That is one of the two biggest sangreal ever created. That it was the woman, the female Aes Sedai in Lews Therin's time, that wanted to use these massive sangreal to try and seal up the ball, where Lews Therin was, advocating for rushing, and sealing it at the place. He mentions the sea folk, that all they care about is not treasure beneath this thing, but he already mentions the Coromur, which is, their chosen one, which is, again, I mean, I should stop being surprised by this, but is mentioned so early in the story. Like it's right in the beginning, and you're already hearing about the Coromur, and even in this batch of chapters, you hear about the Aiel talking about their chosen one.
Yep.
So it's surfacing everywhere already. He talks about the frieze of animals in Tanchico, and the bones that are sort of arranged like a dinosaur, display in a museum would be. He doesn't say it's, obviously he doesn't know what dinosaurs are, but he talks about animals that no one has ever seen. He talks about light sticks, razor lace, and heartstone. Light sticks could be matches. I don't know what razor lace is, but he mentions heartstone. And I was saying last time that I think he's got one of the Dark One seals in his boat, and he does. I looked it up, and he is traveling with one of the Quendalar seals. So he mentions heartstone because he knows it and owns some. He also talks about a crystal lattice over an island that hums when the moon is out. I don't quite know if that's ever mentioned again. But then he also talks about a hollowed out mountain with a steel spire 100 spans high, and anyone that comes close to it dies. And when I read this, I thought, oh, that is weird. No one ever mentions that again. And then I thought, hang on, is that like a nuclear missile silo?
I got the impression it was a satellite dish kind of a thing, because it's like a satellite bowl with a spire in the middle.
That could be.
Why would people die when they get close to it? Yeah.
Well, if there was a nuke, leaking radioactive material, people might not die on the spot, but anyone that comes near it would die eventually because of radiation poisoning.
Perhaps.
I don't know. Interesting thought.
Good theory.
So, so 4 days into the trip, we find Rand sitting on top of the mast of the ship in a real, what was the guy from Forrest Gump? His Vietnam captain.
Colonel Dan.
Colonel Dan.
Yes, Colonel Dan. Sitting on top of the thing, laughing into the wind and sort of like spreading his legs and trying to balance as the mast is swaying to and fro. And he's not really like paying attention to like anyone below him. And when he does look down, he's laughing. And then he sees Thom sort of climbing up and trying to convince him to come down. And he almost falls, and the whole crew ends up like they're all looking at him. And when Thom gets to him and asks him to come down from there, Rand sort of does this like maneuver, like he jumps off and he grabs the rope and then he hooks his leg over it and his elbow and he slides all the way down to the deck and he drops off the rope and he lands basically near Matt and then makes like a flourish as if that was a trick that he was trying to do. And everyone's like, okay.
There's a scattering of applause as well when he does it. Yeah, they're unsure, like, okay,
cool. But I couldn't get past the fact that I thought he must have gotten such roasties from that rope sliding down in the crook of his arm. And from
I think that's the least of his problems.
It is. But what it does do is it reinforces that thing we keep saying every time it happens, is that the boys obviously have physical capabilities that are, pretty high up. Like he's able to jump off this thing and catch something else and slide down the rope. And then when he's landed next to Matt, he's sort of in a position where Matt didn't see him coming, and he spots the dagger. And so Matt immediately gets defensive about it, and he hides it, and he swears Rand to secrecy. And then when Thom has climbed down and he comes up to the boys, he praises Rand's capabilities, and he said, look, that little flourish you did at the end, that did go some ways to making the people think that you're not absolutely insane, but don't do something like that again. And then he starts talking about the fact that Rand actually has some, proficiency in that area, and maybe you should consider, taking that on the road with him. Like Thom is continually from this point forward making those sorts of illusions that, like, you can come perform with me, we can go travel.
Yeah, this whole saving the world thing, leave it behind.
Being there, saw that, forget it.
And so Rand looks back at the mast that he had climbed up, and he can't believe that he was up there, and he's sort of like, what was I thinking? That is not how Rand is characterized in any of the earlier chapters either. So Rand is definitely acting out of character. And as rereaders of the story, we're all on the lookout for signs of madness, of a voice in Rand's head, of him acting the way that he wasn't, accustomed to, him getting all cocky with those white cloaks in Baerlon, like that was, we were speculating about, like, whenever these flashes of another personality start coming out, is that indicative of something that Lews Therin would do, or like even just his character traits manifesting in Rand? And I think there's something to that, because Robert Jordan goes out of his way to mention the fact that this is not Rand's normal behavior. He's acting out of character, and at least at this time was totally unprompted. Like nothing. He wasn't, facing life or death situation or anything. He just went up there and started acting like a crazy person. Yeah. So that's that chapter. Did you guys pick anything out of there before I spoil the story for Villy?
Oh, yes.
Villy's got a list.
I will strangle you with the corpse of the great serpent. When Rand is in the dream world there. That is a lot you'll start picking up all of a sudden, the mention of the great serpent. That's starting to come in, and the determination to break time. Sort of kill the serpent, break time, ultimately win, and that's it.
Yeah.
Very powerful sentence, that.
Yeah, there's also, in the dream world, the fact that Baalzamon is looking for him, and that when Rand realizes it's a dream, it starts thinking things get blurry. Like he's starting to get control over the dream world. Telanriod, as some might pronounce it.
Okay, Villy, your turn. Have a go.
The lung hemorrhoid.
A long hemorrhoid. No.
In the editing, I'll smash our 3 versions together and always play it, all 3 of us pronouncing it badly at the same time.
Exactly.
Good. So yeah, that kind of thing as well. I mean, and then when he turns a corner and he bumps into Belzebub, like Belzebub's surprised. Like he didn't know where he was. And even the first couple of chapters, when the first times he meets him in the dream, he's standing in front of a fireplace waiting for Rand. Like he's in complete control. And here he's already losing it.
Why do you think that is?
Well, he mentions to him as well, it's a dream. Rand shouted at him, "This is a dream." And his eyes began to widen in surprise and anger at both. So it's kind of, he's now realizing Rand is also gaining control of this scenario, and he doesn't have the full control of the dream world there and able to trick him.
Yeah, Rand is not just a country bumpkin that is going to believe this is reality and he can just scare the shit out of him into doing, what he wants him to do. So yeah, Rand is definitely, I mean, we can agree that it is the dream world, right? I mean, the whole physical harm coming through. When I read this the first time, I thought it was something Belzebub was doing, but it's not. It's just, he's just operating. Ishmael is just using the world of dreams to fuck with Rand and the other boys. Was it the ways, the stone spires with the little ramps and stuff? Because in the dream world, it is still dimly lit. But it does smell of earth and death and stuff. So it's not described in the way that Moiraine describes it being originally. But it's also not the absolute pitch black darkness that the ways are currently.
I don't know. I didn't even consider that.
Because it's sort of described in a similar, with the sort of the railingless spans between them, and some of the platforms being above the others where it shouldn't physically be possible. It's sort of like it's a trick of the mind. Is something that they say when they're traveling through the ways as well. When Rand or someone is thinking about how they're moving through them, they should be directly above where they were just minutes before, but there's nothing underneath it. Like that sort of like mind-bending Escher-like space.
I'm going to have to read those chapters with the ways in it when they're in the ways to remember. I don't remember that in that detail.
Yeah, we're not there yet. Vili is, I think.
Yeah, I'm almost through that at the moment. I've slowed down a bit. I've been rereading the book too much.
Anyway, I just thought that was probably or potentially the ways. And then the big one, okay. When Rand is looking in the mirror in the world of dreams, and he sees Belzebub's face, he sees his own face, one face. Vili, where you read up to, I'm pretty sure that Moiraine is on the scene already, right?
Yeah, he is.
Which is just Ishmael resurrected, right? And he's the Naiblis. He's been named the 2IC to the Dark One. And Moiraine plays a weird part ever since. What happens between them? Like they shoot balefire at each other, and like they do a Ghostbusters crossing of the streams or something. And,
yes, their balefires touch each other. I don't know what kind of metaphor they're trying to.
And from then on, like Rand sees Moiraine in his mind, and like there's a weird sort of like congruence between their lives that is repeatedly mentioned. Now at the end of the books, Vili, because all the prophecies say that Rand dies, that the Dragon Reborn, or like his blood is on those rocks in Min sees his blood on the rocks at Shal Ghul and that sort of thing. Eventually, when Rand walks away from this thing, because he does, Rand survives, but his body doesn't. He and Moiraine switch bodies. And at the end of the book, when Rand walks away from Thom and Gaidon, he looks like Moiraine. He's in Moiraine's body, but he is still Rand.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
This is a spoiler cast.
Yes, it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel terrible for saying it, but you walked into this eyes open.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, at least when you're going to be reading stuff, like when you start seeing that interaction, I mean, it's at this stage years away for us because it's only later in the books. But I mean, you're going to start noticing that is foreshadowing of, Rand
What's
actually
gonna happen in
becoming
the end?
Moradin. Yeah. So yeah, that was like, this is book one. Halfway through book one, hints at already the end of the last book.
Absolutely.
He did have a plan. He wasn't just aimlessly writing novels. He had a plan.
Yeah. There we go.
Unlike some writers.
J.J. Abrams.
I was referencing season 8 there.
But he loves going back to that one.
Yep.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that going around.
So other than that, the boat busy going to to Whitebridge. Anything else? Not much. A lot of dream imagery.
Whenever there's a dream, there's always a lot of meat.
Yes. But okay, let's roll on to chapter 25, The Traveling People.
Oh, those pesky gypsies.
They are straight up gypsies.
Hold your children close.
Hold your children
All the
close.
stereotypes just thrown right into the mix.
Yeah, no, look, Perrin, Elyas and Egwene are still very much traveling. And through open hills, sort of slow going. At least they're eating better because Hopper, Dapple, and Wind are with them. So there's a better hunting. They get their chances at a few extra things. And eventually they come close to an outcropping, like a larger leafy outcropping. And they're sort of like half a mile away. And 3 massive mastiffs come running out, growling from the trees. And Elyas just sort of lifts his finger and hisses at them. And everyone's still in panic. Even Bella's eyes are going wider, like panicking about these big mastiffs. And then he starts whistling and lowering his whistling pitch and lowers his finger, and the dog sort of like follows and lies flat on the ground, ears flat back. And he said, yeah, see, you don't need any weapons for this one. And everyone sort of, Perrin and Egwene's obviously like, whoa, to the point where Egwene's jaw was almost dragging on the floor, and she had closed her mouth that you could hear a teeth clap. I found that funny. Yeah. And then Elyas tells them there will be here we go. Tuatauan.
I just say Tuathaan in my head.
Yeah, I went Tuathaan. The Tinkers. Let's go with that. And Egwene obviously has got preconceptions around them that they are thieves. It's they and the people from Tarrant Ferry and just all thieves. Stay away. They're going to steal Bella. We don't want to go there. Bella's going to get stolen.
She says something about the fact that if they had to go to Tarrant Ferry, they'd probably rob each other blind or something. Just tarring everyone with the same brush.
Exactly. Yeah. And Elyas sort of knows, all you're going to get is a lot of foolishness. And they are no more thieves than most people I know. And sort of just keep your secrets to yourself. And they sort of go closer in. The wolves, Perrin feels the wolves are staying away. He knows they're outside, but they're not close by. So over here, Perrin is not really feeling the wolves. He's kind of fighting it, but he's constantly knowing where they are. And the Tinkers, gypsies with style, is a note I got, yeah. They walked into the camps, music playing all about. There's 5 or 6 different campfires going. And as soon as they noticed walking in, the music all stopped, sort of dead silence, a little quiet moment there. And a wiry man with grey hair and shorts steps up and bowed gravely to Elyas. You are welcome at our fires. Do you know the song? And Elyas bows back to him in the same manner. Your welcome warms my spirit, Mahdi, as your fires warms my flesh, but I do not know the song. And this is Rain that we then meet, who's the Mahdi, or the seeker of that band of Tinkers. And the song is what they seek, and it was lost in the breaking. So we'll get a little bit closer to that song in a bit. Ila is Rain's wife. She welcomes them all, and eventually later on, Aram joins the fray, who's their grandson, and he's the sort of same age as Perrin, and he's likened to Will Elsane.
Will
Elsane, the ladies' boy. He's always speaking
from Devon Ride.
Devon Ride, yes. Perrin asks them about the dogs, kind of like, why would you have the dogs? And, kids playing around these big mastiffs, grabbing them by the ears and hanging on them. And Aram then sort of pipes up, they were trained in the way of the leaf. And sort of, Perrin's asking questions. Elyas kind of like, shh, don't get them started. Don't want to get these guys started about the way of the leaf. And then basically,
Elyas warns them ahead of time. He says, like,
yeah, they've
just,
got foolish.
they talk about some pretty wacky stuff. Just keep
brace
your wits
yourself.
about you. Mm.
And the explanation is the leaf lives its appointed time and does not struggle against the wind that carries it away. The leaf doesn't harm and finally falls and nourishes new leaves. So should it be with all men and women. No excuse for violence, none, never, basically. Just, that's their way of being completely passive, lack of a better word, I suppose. And his parents got a lot of questions about this. Like, I mean, what if a man robs you? What if a man tries to harm you? It's and to the point where Rain eventually tells him that, that big axe on your side, you can chop down many trees with it. But over time, the tree sap dulls the blade and it starts to rust, and the blade remembers the trees that it's chopped. Kind of a complete peaceful hippie vibe, I'd say.
The hippie gypsies.
The hippie gypsies, yeah.
With style.
With style. Hippie gypsies with style.
I dig these as.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're very peaceful. Like it's going to be a very colorful scene when we do get to that in the show. It's, I mean, there's Elyas' clothes is so bright that it sort of Perrin had to strain his eyes when he looked at her. It's kind of like, goddamn, color blocking.
Power clashing.
Big time. But as they sit down now, and eventually Green sort of gets lured away by Aram, and they're going to go eat with his mother. And Perrin's trying to, no, don't go with him, but they go off. And Rain starts to tell Elyas about a story that they came across 2 years ago, or that happened 2 years ago, when a band was crossing the waste. And Perrin nearly choked on his food when they spoke about that they go into the waste. I mean, like, no one goes to the waste. Aiel will kill you there. They're like, no, that's just normal. We go. That's not a worry.
We are Aiel.
Yeah, they are. We'll get to all those explanations. And basically, as they were traveling, they came across Maiden of the Spear that was crawling towards them, dead and dying. And all her group of maidens that she was with has already been slaughtered, and there was 3 times as many Trollocs around them. And they clearly came out of the blight, sort of with something, and were hunted down, I think is pretty much what I can gather out of it. And she got herself all the way to this band and to whoever it was there, and said, Leaf Blighter means to blind the eye of the world, lost one. He means to slay the great serpent, kill time of it, warn the people, lost one. Sightburner comes, tell them to stand ready for he who comes with the dawn.
There it
Tell
is.
them.
Yep. There it is.
This another big prophecy over there. The Karakarn.
Oh, yeah, we go.
Karakarn?
Yeah.
We're going to set a record in this ep for mispronunciations.
Absolutely. Well, these are made words. And but I mean that was pretty big there. Elyas is taken by this. I mean, parents just got questions about Trollocs. You go to the blight. You've seen the waste. Like there's Aiel there. He can't really take all of this in. And yeah, this one sort of got Elyas tickled because that's a lot of weirdness in there. But yeah, the lost ones are obviously referring to the band or the Tinkers that she's speaking to at the time, the maiden, because they are referred to as the lost ones. As Moritz, you pointed out there, they used to be the Dashain Aiel that was in service of the Aes Sedai, and they always upheld the way of the leaf. And there was sort of a divide between them, and the split. One part forsake the command of the Aes Sedai and instead started seeking for the song of growing. So the song that they seek for is the Song of Growing, not the same as the Ogier Song of Growing, apparently.
Not okay.
Yeah, so Robert Jordan noted this in 2013, I think, that the song is much more deep and philosophical concept and perhaps unattainable. So throughout all of this, they still haven't found the song, and it might be a pure sort of philosophical thing. But I thought, because I remember the Ogier also sings, they have the song for growing, but it isn't that. I found that after doing some reading there. Yeah. And there was, where Rand gets his vision in Terangriaroid and Ruidium, where Celinda Sedai tells Janai, keep moving, always moving, until you find a place of safety where no one can harm you. And Jonai was Jonai, was Dashain Aiel.
Yeah, those names mean nothing to me at the moment.
Yeah, that is, I think we're going to get over there. So yeah, this chapter is pretty big in the sense of that message that they receive coming out of the waste.
Yeah, the Trollocs, I think, or not the Trollocs, but the Shield Maidens that speak to the Tinkers mention the Eye of the World again. And I think Baalzamon mentions it in one of the dreams, maybe even to Perrin in these chapters, where he says, the Eye of the World will not serve you. It's the first couple times now that you start hearing about it as a thing that they need, or you don't know that they need to at this point, but it's something that they will be interacting with. I mean, it is the name of the book. But it also falls into one of those things I've mentioned every episode now, where it's not quote unquote normal. There aren't other places like the Eye of the World in other parts of Randland. It's this weird, unique thing where, from what I remember, it's like a massive store of the One Power. Like a bunch of Aes Sedai sacrifice themselves to store this power to be used for whatever, and it's being protected by the Green Man, which is also a weird anomaly, if I can call it that.
Isn't he the last of his kind? I mean, was he of a kind, the Green Man, or was he always just the one and only?
Can't remember.
No, regardless, he dies at the end.
Spoiler cast.
But yeah, it's leaf blighter means to blind the eye of the world.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, the first time I read this, all of this was sort of what gibberish.
Yes.
Some foretelling. It means no sense. But now there's a lot more that stands out quite a bit for me. And obviously, when you see he who comes with the dawn.
Yes.
On the third day, look to the east.
So, Joe, did you have any notes or anything from that chapter?
I did, but so much was spoken. I've already forgotten what they were. Somebody else can go ahead, and then I'll come back to you.
Way of the Water of the Aiel is also it's sort of a part of the Way of the Leaf. So when they were still Dashain Aiel, the Tinkers, they lived by the Way of the Water, and that sort of changed over time. The bit that is also noted in all the fandom stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, there's obviously massive implications to learning the truth about the Tinkers to the Aiel later in the story. Like when that whole when Rand spills the beans, basically, and tells everyone, yeah, you guys are actually the rejects. The true Aiel are actually the Tinkers. You guys are the offshoot. And that's why I think half of them end up following Couladin and split away from Rand and he who comes with the dawn, essentially, because they can't face that truth. It is that shocking to them and that unacceptable that they discard all their prophecies and stuff and they follow this other idiot with the overbearing mother.
And some of them just give up, don't they? They're just like, well, fuck all this shit then.
Aren't they also called the Lost blight, or the Brotherless or something like? Yeah.
But they start their own thing. Oh wow, lots coming.
The lost ones of the lost ones.
Yes,
that's pretty lost, man.
What was also real cool is that Perrin has a wolf guarding his dreams. Ever since he links up with Elyas and the wolves,
Yep.
he
No more
doesn't have
dreams.
the Balsamon dreams anymore.
Yes. That's the other thing.
And they're all like his dreams of being back home and working in the forge and being in Mistress Lewin's kitchen and that sort of stuff. And there's always a wolf, always with his back to him. Basically, it's implied standing guard. I don't know if they ever say that it's Hopper, but because of the relationship that Perrin and Hopper build, I'm assuming it's Hopper that's sort of like looking after him already, which is really cool.
Yeah. So he doesn't, he just upgrades and gets free wards without having to deal with Aes Sedai at all.
I mean, Perrin and Egwene lucked in big time, linking up with Elyas and the wolves. That's one of my notes in the later chapter when they're busy traveling and avoiding the ravens stuff. Just how lucky Perrin and Egwene were to actually have this like ex-warder woodsman and actual wolves scouting for them, leading them, cooking for them. Like they really taverned it up.
Yeah, that's not to say that the others don't have any luck either. I mean, Nynaeve ends up with a warder and Moiraine, like an Aes Sedai and a warder. And the boys get Thom, who is a legend in himself. So like everyone's kind of lucked out. They're not just left alone to fend for themselves yet.
I'm glad Robert Jordan created a device to explain that.
Yes.
Well, they're Taverin.
Yeah.
So obviously.
Plot armor, Taverin.
Yes.
Yes, that's what it means in the old tongue.
But you joke, but straight up, I mean, that is what that is basically. I also was just super stoked to already read the words Far Daris Mai, to read about the shield maidens of the spear, was very cool. And the way that like everyone's like, what? Women fight with the men? Yes. Oh yes. Boy, do they.
Yeah.
Yeah, Perrin was just trying to keep his mouth shut during all of this. There was so much being thrown at him at that moment. He just didn't really know what to say.
Totally. And what's Aram's deal? I mean,
he's having a big inner battle. His grandparents are very worried that he's going to forsake the way of the leave and become a lost one of the lost ones.
Yes.
It's and yeah, they're very, very worried.
And he does eventually, right? Like he takes up the sword.
Yeah.
He becomes like super, super, super protective over Perrin somehow.
Yes, you're right.
Him and Fael later on.
But does he, and I don't know if this is cross pollination from Game of Thrones, doesn't he eventually also almost betray Perrin? I might be confusing him with the kid that Jon Snow saves and that eventually shoots him with an arrow.
Yeah.
But I'm mistrustful of Aram.
Never trusted it. We never trusted Gypsy.
As far as I can... As far as I can remember, he does betray them, but not. I think he's just so intense later on. He just he just wants to kill and fight all the time. And Perrin's just like, dude, chill the fuck out a little bit, please. And he sees that as a betrayal. And also coming back to that fight down the Arenal, like a couple of chapters back now, the spire that they're talking about, the glowing metal thing. I mean, that's the where the elfin and the ilfin are, right? Isn't that it?
Yes.
We didn't even say that. So I just thought I'd mention it.
True, yes.
Not just some random fire.
We actually hinted at it last time because we were talking about Mordeth getting the Mashadar power from the Elfin and the Eelfin. And we mentioned that spire was actually not very far from Shadow Logoth. It was a couple of days down the river. But yes, that is one of the Towers of Midnight.
Indeed. So yeah. Another shining spire of foreshadowing there.
Even Matt, I mean, I know we're going back to the previous chapter now, but when they're on the boat and the boat is going past the tower, Matt is sort of transfixed by it. And even when they pass behind some trees and you can't see it, Rand notices that Matt is staring at the tower as if he can still see it. And if that is in fact where the power of Mashadar comes from, then it makes sense that the dagger Matt is holding would draw his attention to it. Like there's a nice little synchronicity there.
Yes,
that is true.
Be.
Anything else about old Tinkers, our hippie gypsy friends? I will say this, that all the stereotypes and the parallels drawn with modern stereotypes with gypsies are blown out of the water pretty quickly when Perrin realizes that these people are totally harmless and actually quite lovely, and that their craftsmanship is second to none. He wants to see how they mend a pot because
Yes.
Mistress Luan
Luan.
once had a pot mended, and the blacksmith was sort of like, let me see that work. He couldn't sort of cope with the fact that something was mended better than new. So they definitely dispel those stereotypes pretty quickly, which is good to see, and that you don't carry inherent racism throughout the story. All right, should we move on swiftly to Whitebridge?
Oh, indeed. Yes, chapter 26, Whitebridge. Yeah. So, yeah, we're back with Thom and Rand and Matt. They're on the boat, on the spray with Bail Domin, and they're approaching Whitebridge. So they're still busy practicing the flute and the juggling and everything. And like, the chapter starts with Matt just finishing off a song on the flute, and then they're showing the rest of the crew removing their hands off their ears and sighing like, oh, thank God that's over. So yeah, Thom is trying to teach
And
them
Thom-
unsuccessfully. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not having much luck. Well, at least not with the flute with Matt. He's just no good. But he can just keep with the juggling, I suppose. So then we get to see where Whitebridge gets its name from as they come in. It's obviously this giant white bridge spanning the river, but made again Ogier style, or made with a one power before the breaking, ancient and difficult to comprehend because it's very fine. There's no way the supports that have it in the water that holding up this bridge can support its weight. It's fantastical. There was something that as they're looking at it, Rand says that for a second he thinks he sees a shadow shimmer through the bridge. I don't know if that's relevant at all. It maybe come up later, but I didn't see anything after that. But I thought,
I feel like it was triggered by him thinking along the lines of something from the Age of Legends. And it's like sort of when he evokes the Age of Legends, he thinks he can see something shimmer across the bridge, which the only tie between him and the Age of Legends is Lews Therin in his head.
Yeah.
So I don't know if by casting his mind to that sort of space, Lews Therin noticed something about it. I don't remember ever in the story reading anything about the bridge actually doing anything. But it might just be there to establish that link between, that consciousness in Rand's head and the actual time when the bridge was made.
Perhaps. Well, I hope something comes up from it, because these little sentences now on this reread again, you notice those sentences. Like, whoa, what was that?
You do.
Yeah. What's this
you
foreshadowing?
retain them, and you're looking for something to tie it to.
Maybe it's nothing, but we'll have to wait and see.
Maybe.
Well, who knows?
Maybe it was a cloud passing over the sun.
That's absolutely nothing at all. So when they get into the dock, immediately Gelb is kicked off. Bale's like, all right, we're at shore. Get the fuck off my boat. For sleeping on the watch, and Gelb is just, daggers out of his eyes at Rand and especially Rand. All of them, all three of those guests, but specifically Rand. So it's like Rand's just cruising along, making enemies in every town, people who will hate him for the rest of their lives. Nothing serious, and we're not even realizing it. And then something else that Domin mentions, Bale, on the boat is like, well, yeah, we haven't seen any Trollocs for a while. Like, perhaps it was you that they were after. Like, well, who else would they be after, you Quendalar smuggling pirate? So, yeah, he is, he's got something. But yeah, he's obviously, when he was, like you said, mentioned earlier in that previous chapter, when he was talking about all the great things you'll see. So he's got that bugger's bitten him, and he's just cruising around collecting cool shit and weird stuff. So yeah, one of them is sealed to the Dark One's prison. Then they get off the boat, obviously. The merchants swarm around the boat to talk to. I don't know if there's anything about these merchants. They're wearing black robes and soft slippers. I don't know if that's important or anything. But anyway, the town I found is in juxtaposition with the fantastical bridge that's there. There's a kind of a smallish town at the foot of the bridge with a really old square of worn stone and some dirty inns, You would think that this fantastical bridge would have this amazing city next to it, but it's not. It's just some shithole that people stop over.
Yeah.
So,
I did not care for it.
No. Shithole. So, arid holes, shitholes everywhere. So, they head into town. They're going to go find some information. Yeah, again, like as Moritz mentioned, Thom is flexing his spy muscles. And they go into
Mm-hmm.
town to go find out some information. They head into one of the taverns there, which is no one's in it. The floors are filthy and just a real crappy place. And to speak to the owner there, the innkeeper, to find out what's happened. And then the news that they hear, he's like, "Oh man, have I got news for you? You want news? I've got news." So apparently there was a big war when Logain tried to move his army to Ilion because of the looking for the stone, or from Ilion to Tyr, I think it was, to go to the stone of Tyr. Because he knows the prophecies as well. He was looking for the sword that is not a sword. But the Aes Sedai were there. There was a battle, and they captured him and stilled him. Gentled him, I suppose they say. And they were on the road north now. He's captured. He's in chains, and they're heading up to Tar Valon, or Tar Valon, however you want to pronounce it. Here we go again. Yeah. So, and I remember later on, when they do meet up with him in Camelin, if I remember correctly, or is it?
Mm-hmm.
Was in Cairhine where they meet him.
No, it's Camelin. It's when
Camelin.
Rand meets
standing on the
Elaine.
walls.
He climbs up on the wall. Yeah.
Like, who is this guy just climbing up on the palace walls? Yeah, and that later as well. That also reminds me that one of the things I do remember from reading it is that later on, Logain mentions that he was sitting in his cage and he saw Rand glowing on top of the walls. Do you remember that?
No. That's
he mentions
amazing.
it later. He didn't know who it was at the time or whatever, but he knew, holy shit, that guy is something special. Because when Rand's just trying to get, like, he climbed up the walls to have a look at, well, this is not in the chapter, people, just coming in the future. It was the moment where he was climbing on the walls to get a better look at Logain, and Logain saw him shining like a beacon.
Wow.
So, that comes in later. Cool stuff, man.
Yeah.
So, they're asking about the innkeeper. The innkeeper's telling them all stories, and then Gelb comes in. To the it's just like and then
fucking Gelb,
and while they're asking the innkeeper about, like, hey, what about some people? Have you seen these people? The innkeeper gets really nervous and he's like, yeah, some other slinky little bastard was in here asking about these exact same people. So Fane is still on the road, Payne Fane. He's still looking for them. They're mentioning the same people, and also he mentions a Fade that was in the tavern asking about the same people, and specifically for 3 young country boys. Glancing quickly at these 2 young country boys. So this is about this point in the story when Geld comes in and they're talking about fades and stuff, that they think, well, listen, we better get the fuck out of here. And they can't get out the front door because Gelb is right there. So they sneak out the window into an alleyway. So they sneak out the window in there, and Thom decides, okay, let's hang out for a second. I'm going to get some disguises. He comes back in a cloak, and he's taken off his, because they were trying to be inconspicuous, but he's running around in this multicolored patchwork cloak, and everyone's looking and asking about him. So he figures, okay, maybe we'll do some hiding while they're in the alley, like getting dressed and getting changed, putting on his cloak and packing away his gleam stuff. And as they walk out of the alleyway, they see a Fade across the square. This is broad daylight. And he starts walking towards them because he fixes on them immediately. And they find it Rand finds it even difficult to pull his eyes away. Like Thom says to him, like, don't stare at him. Don't look in his eyes. Don't look at his face. And Rand has to physically tear his eyes off the Fade. And he tells the boys, like, listen, take my stuff and run. And then, of course, just barrels into a Fade and tackles him to the ground. Crazy old man. Out come his knives. Classic. This is where we lose him, I think, for a couple of 100 chapters. And you see the lightning flashing in the sky again, and as they're battling, and the boys run and freak out, and everyone in the square is just running in all directions trying to escape. Like they mentioned, like an anthill that's been kicked over, and everyone's just fleeing for their lives.
Yeah.
So all kind of crazy shit is happening over there. But before they do this, they're in the alleyway, and that's where Thom mentions again why he has such disdain for Aes Sedai, and he mentions that it was his nephew, and we find out there that his brother had an only son, Owen, and he just says, well, he's very cryptic about it, but he says, let's just say he's dead because of the Aes Sedai, and he's not very specific.
Yeah.
So anyway, he tells the boys, listen, meet up at the Queen's Blessing in Camelin, and tackles the Fade, and the boys run, and off they go out of the city, out of the shithole, onto the road. And that's where their little exciting journey begins on their own, as I recall, with, playing the flute from town to town, sleeping under bushes and things. But yeah,
my least favorite stretch of the story.
Well, yeah, it's nothing great, but in hindsight, it's not too bad. Yeah. So off they go onto the road, and that's where the chapter ends, with them riding off into the distance. But yeah, did I miss anything? Did you guys pick up on something else?
I really enjoyed when they described the Fade walking across the courtyard, like he just appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah.
They couldn't tell where he'd come from. And even with him just striding across the town square, people were already getting the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Like the square was clearing. The fact that this dude was just walking down the courtyard cleared the square.
Yeah.
And that just is going to be, it's also going to look cool in the show, like broad daylight. This Fade is talking to innkeepers and stuff. You start realizing these guys are not just like hiding in the shadows and stuff. They are out and about. But yeah, the way that Fade cleared that courtyard was cool.
Mm-hmm. And there's a surprise on his face as well. He was walking towards Thom, and Thom just started running towards him, and he couldn't get his sword out in time before Thom was already
Genius.
there. Yeah.
Genius
move.
Yeah.
Good on you, Thom. So yeah, again, a little bit of insight into Thom's background. He's not your average Glee man. But
yeah, all shit went down there. I mean, we'll see the aftermath when we get to Footprints in the Air. It's a bit of a shit show.
Yeah. There's a section at the start of this chapter. I'll just read it quickly because it's short. But he says, they had to believe the others were alive. They had to. And then why? Nagged a voice in the back of his head. So it will all turn out like one of Tom's stories. The heroes find the treasure and defeat the villain and live happily ever after. Some of his stories don't end that way. Sometimes even heroes die. Are you a hero, Randall Thor? Are you a hero, Sheepherder? I mean, that could straight up be Lews Therin.
Oh, that is totally Lews Therin.
He's calling him Randall Thor. He's not referring to himself in the third person. He's calling him Sheepherder. And without a shadow of a doubt, Lews Therin thinks of himself as the hero that died.
For sure. Wow.
Pretty much the same time that Rand starts really getting in touch with this, Perrin all of a sudden starts almost now getting into the wolves and accepting it. And poor Matt is just blinded by that dagger. He lost out of it.
But Matt's already started shouting things in the old tongue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they're all sort of changing very quickly.
Yeah, but I think Billy's right that Matt is kind of on the back foot now. His progress is stunted now.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Stunted growth.
Yeah. He's not leveling up. He's been level drained.
Yeah, exactly.
My last note for that chapter is Thom is a badass.
It's a fine note, sir.
It was after that I had to really dig deep into my memory when Thom comes out again, or if he ever does. It's kind of like, no, I'm pretty certain he does, because I mean it's also been years since I read this, and kind of a moment where you're like, no.
Those are some interesting noises there, Billy. But he does come back with a limp. I mean, that's pretty good going, fighting a Fade, and you come out with a limp.
With daggers. Only daggers.
Daggers.
Totally.
All he had was daggers.
Yeah. I mean, Fades have killed warders.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we mosey along?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. So chapter 27 is Shelter from the Storm. Okay, so we join Perrin, Egwene, and Elyas as they travel with the Tinkers. Perrin wants to leave the Tinkers behind because he's afraid that, whatever's chasing them, the Fades and the Trollocs and the Drakkar and the Hellhounds and the that and the this and the that, like every fucking shadow spawn and his dog is after them. So he quite sensibly wants to leave them behind. But Elyas says to just stay with the Tinkers because something tells him they should, and he's learned to trust that feeling. Egwene is mostly preoccupied with Aiel or Aram. Like in the evening, she's busy talking to Aiel if she's not busy dancing up a storm with Aram. And on the second night, Perrin sees this girl do this dance and sort of looking at him, and then more girls join this dance. The more they realize that this dance they are doing, this what I assume is something like a belly dance or some kind of sensual display, it makes him super, super uneasy, and he just flushes red. And the more he reacts to it, the more women are joining and actually all looking at him and like straight up winking at him and making him uncomfortable, which is great. And then Egwene tries to learn the dance, and Aram is painted as this lecherous sort of like dude sitting on the sidelines, basically salivating at the idea of being with Egwene. At least that's how I imagine it, because I just do not like this dude.
Rightly so.
but he's also antagonizing towards Perrin, right? So like he walks off with Egwene, he looks over his shoulder and sort of shoots a grin in Perrin's direction, which is he's placing himself as a direct opposition to Perrin. So it's interesting that he later becomes so like mega loyal to them, but he's obviously a troubled kid. Isla gives Perrin a green cloak, and makes a comment about his, it could fit better in eyeballing his axe. And Perrin sort of notes that he's actually displaying his axe more often than he ordinarily would. He's often throwing back his cloak to show it, and I think it's sort of his way to just make it clear that he is not falling for their charms. Their hippie ways are very alluring, and that's what he realizes. A lot of people make the Tinkers out to be stealers of children and people, when in fact it's just they've got this way of life that seems to be very alluring. And Perrin also starts becoming more and more aware of the wolves. Wind wants to leave, but Hopper, they elaborate a bit on Hopper's personality. He's an old, wily, really, really smart wolf that is super loyal to Dapple, and he sort of keeps Wind in check. I took a note here saying that I think it's Hopper guarding Perrin's dreams, which I still think it is. But then Perrin has a dream about being in Mistress Lewin's kitchen when, she also doesn't bat an eyelid when a wolf walks in and sits there sort of guarding. But then Balsamon shows up in this dream, sets the wolf on fire from the inside, like just deals with it. And then all through the dream, I mean, this doesn't really matter, but Mistress Lewin is just sort of carrying on, like, tapping the kettle with her spoon and going on while Balsamon is standing and they're talking to him. And he somehow marks Perrin, like he throws his hand out towards Perrin and like a raven, bites him in the eye or something like that. It's this really invasive, intrusive thing in his eye. And it was a raven, right? Like a raven pecks him in the eye. And I don't know how that sort of ties up with the ravens chasing them, but it could be a sort of dream world representation of Ishmael setting the ravens on them, using ravens to chase them. Because, there's a lot
later
of
they
that.
do.
Yes.
I would just like to interject here and say how awesome it is that we know all of these wolves by name and like really get to know them as characters. You're like, oh, Dapple
Yes.
and Hopper. And I'm like, oh, yeah, Dapple and Hopper, of course.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
integral parts to the story. Continue, sorry.
I think, where did Hopper get his name? I think we'll get to that later, obviously. But I think it's because he always wanted to fly, and he was in the dream world. He's like always jumping, like high, like trying to fly. But Perrin wakes up with Elyas next to him, sort of outstretched, like as if he was about to wake him, and he can sense the wolves sort of saying, he just senses the words fire, pain, fire, hate, hate, kill. So obviously, wolves are agitated, to say the least.
Yes.
And Elyas just says, okay, now they have to go. And Rain also says, look, the Tinkers also, Rain somehow senses that there's something amiss and that they will be changing course as well. And he invites them to obviously keep traveling with him. But Elyas says, no, they have to leave. And when Elyas says goodbye to them, Elyas gives them the formal sort of ceremonial goodbye to Perrin's surprise. But then the wolves tell Elyas about Heartfang in Perrin's dream. So Heartfang obviously being the name for the dark one that the wolves have. And Perrin tries to push the wolves from his mind, and he finds that he actually can. And as they leave, Egwene cracks a joke, and Elyas chuckles, and they seem sort of jovial, like they've just left this traveling band of hippies. Aram gave Egwene some blue beads that she's hanging on to, and off they go.
Yep.
And that's the end of the chapter. Not an awful lot to pull out of that one.
No, I'm just looking forward to the gypsy dance scene.
Yeah. It'll be, I wonder how much time they'll actually spend on the Tinkers, considering what a pivotal role they play in the bigger story for the Aiel. But at this stage, like when you encounter them, they're just basically there's like a colorful distraction from the black dread that is everything else thus far. What you get a lot in that chapter is the sort of the tension between the Tinkers and Elyas. I can't remember if anything specific happened, but Isla seems to be like very wary of Elyas, or at least like actually actively dislike him, but sort of has to put up with him because of the way of the leaf and the way that they treat strangers. Rain refers to Elyas as my good friend. You know, they've obviously known each other for a long time. Elyas has never been tempted by the way of the leaf, so I can't remember if there was something that Elyas did, maybe in service of like protecting one of the Tinkers or something like that, you know, killing in their name or something like that, which drove Isla against him, because there's definitely like a lot of tension between them, and surprise even from Rain and Isla and the Tinkers when Elyas gives the formal ceremonial goodbye when he leaves.
I thought when I was reading it the first time, that tension is obvious, but I thought maybe it was some sort of sexual tension, like perhaps they had a thing back in the day, or he was just passing through and she thought it was more, and he was like, no, I'm going to chill with my wolves. Thanks for the night.
Perhaps that was it. Before she met Rain, she tried to sway Elyas over to the way of the leaf through dances.
Through that belly dance. Yeah.
Golden opportunity for some fan fiction. Yeah, this is gold.
But yeah, that was for me. What stood out again was also that very quick separation, where all of them know, no, we got to go different directions. It's sort of a very quick parting. It happened very suddenly. Sort of, Egwene was sort of taken by it, like, oh no, I still want to dance a lot.
She was sort of falling for that little song and dance, so to speak.
Literally the song and dance.
Yes, exactly. She was buying into the whole thing, which is uncharacteristic of her, right? Like she's very headstrong, stubborn, independent. You know, like all the things we've said about her thus far sort of go out the window here. Like, I mean, she just goes along with Aram, and she's sort of into their way of life, learning their dances and stuff. Like, not at all sort of positioning herself as someone that's about to leave at any moment. She was captivated by their way.
Maybe she just took the opportunity to learn.
Yeah, also 27 chapters of being on the run and being chased and all horrid shit happening, and now she's hanging out with some peaceful people and some good-looking boy. She just wants to take advantage of it as long as possible, you know. Just take a break.
We live Friday to Friday. Just want to get the week work behind us. Just dance a bit.
Okay, let's go for chapter 28, Vil. Footprints in Air.
Ooh, good title, that one. It's kind of a very short chapter, and not a lot that happens in means of what's happening. They're traveling to Whitebridge, Moiraine, Nynaeve, and Lan, and footprints in the air is literally following the feeling of where these boys are. It's a lot of tension in a dialogue with Nynaeve and Moiraine.
So the chapter starts with them arriving in Whitebridge.
No, right? Not yet. They're still 3 days out of Whitebridge, just going along the banks of the Arenelle. Lan kind of almost at one stage, like prompting her, like, look, when we get to the bridge, maybe you should turn back to the two rivers. And Moiraine saying again, like, no, she's woven into the pattern, she can't. And the more Nynaeve presses Moiraine for, like, what's the plan? What are you going to do? Like, I don't like this. She's kind of very uptight. And there's a palatable tension between the two, where very often Moraine's got to sort of firm up and, like, when you get to the tower, we'll deal with your temper. Like, just you wait.
Tension between Nynaeve and someone else? How bizarre.
Oh, how bizarre. It's like she tells her that as part of a training, the White Tower will teach her to control her temper because she keeps going at it. So it's watching the two women as if it's a duel. And Nynaeve wishes that it would stop looking at her as if the duel that she's in, she scored 0, and Moiraine doesn't care for the fact that she's winning the duel, just sitting high and uptight on a horse. But they get to a stage where Nynaeve feels like she's being watched, like almost daggers in her back. And Moiraine lifts her hand and feels the air and then sort of wipes her hand on her dress as if it's almost dirty. And that's when they get nearer to Whitebridge. And like she says, you can feel the shadow. You can feel how strong the taint is in this area. And I mean, just the day before is when the Fade crossed that square and Thom had sort of dove in there and taken him on. And
Hey, hang on. Sorry. The shadow crossing the bridge, is that not how the Fade got into Whitebridge? Maybe that was the Fade entering, because they traveled through the shadows. Now you're mentioning this chapter now and what you said there, like she can feel it in the air. Maybe that's it.
Jody. That's a good one
I
there.
like it. I like it.
But yeah, they can both feel the dark presence. And they reach Whitebridge. Nynaeve doesn't want to gawk like a bumpkin, a farm girl bumpkin at it, but she's actually scared to cross the bridge because she's scared it's going to break, literally. Like, and Lan and Moraine's just carrying on. Click, 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 click. The horses sounds like walking on steel. And she calls it, if lace was made of glass, it would look like this. So it's likened to a lace bridge. Halfway over, they noticed obviously the tarry smell thick in the air, like stink. And Moiraine gets there and they can see sort of the burning down of this town square. The couple of buildings are burned down. A lot of the militias around, up and down in their red cloaks, hands on swords. And Moiraine immediately gets off the horse and starts asking people if they're okay, not questioning them, like genuine concern. She can see that something big went down, and everybody's lying. From stories to we showed them to stories like, nah, nothing's wrong. Yeah, nothing is wrong. Nothing to see. It's but a flesh wound.
Yeah.
And they eventually make their way to the same inn that the boys and Thom were in, and sort of get food, ask a little bit of questions, and the militia come in and immediately starts questioning what they're doing here, and they're like, no, just having lunch, and then we're moving on. No, nothing to see. Like, and that is where Nynaeve now starts demanding softly, because they know the tension is in the air. Like, what's happening? Are we following down river? We can't find the boys there. And eventually Moiraine tells her that, look, they were here not more than 2 days ago. I can still feel them. Their emotion was very strong and they were very scared, but they're alive. And then Nynaeve sort of said, okay, what's the plan? She's like, no, if they have any sense and they listen to what we said, they will be going to Camelin. And that's all we can do. We can just hope that they do.
It's a big ask for these kids.
A big if.
But the only thing that she has is the fact that one of the boys has got his token still, and he's to the north, and that's where we're going. And once we get close to the other two, I'll be able to sense them within a half a mile. I'll be able to sense them, and then we go. And now Nynaeve's pissed off because she didn't mention Egwene. So she's like, obviously I'm not going to let a girl of her skill go. It's something that comes few and far between, so we'll be looking for her too. So this is now the tension, and I think his eyes went sort of big and like glowing. Yeah, so this is the point where it appears that her eyes were glowing while still speaking coldly. She hasn't found a young girl with so much ability, and once I find them,
she's not going to let her go.
Yeah, she's not going to let her go, and the wheel weaves. And so they dealt with there, and that's pretty much it. They finish up their meal and they head on the Camelin Road. It's not a hell of a lot, but Lan also then says at that time, where she mentions that she can feel the boys were in there and their emotions was high and they were scared. It's like, yeah, because there was a Fade here. I can still smell him. I can smell him everywhere. And that is, obviously they burned the Fade in the square. So Thom must have killed the Fade, and there was a hell of a fight, and then they must have burned him because of that smelly, or was there more Trollocs that maybe pulled in?
I got the sense that it was Lan just sensing the Fade. You know how he can sense shadow spawn?
Yeah, but you can sense them when they're alive. But he specifically in the book, it says, I can smell him still in here.
Which is, like, I don't think a Fade, like when you burn a Fade, that it has a specific smell. I don't know.
Burnt a lot of fades in your time, Moritz.
Well, it's just the way I read it.
Yeah.
It's just the way that I read the chapter, how it read to me. It was that I just assumed that Lan was somehow sensing the Shadowspawn had been there. I didn't think it was as literal as he can smell a burnt Halfman.
Could be.
Because I don't know if the townsfolk would have burnt the Halfman in the square. I mean, buildings had burnt, but they didn't say anything about bodies that were burnt.
Maybe I read into that. Perhaps it was very much when Rand was dragging Thom on the litter into Emmons Field. It was also that overpowering smell when they were burning all the Trollocs' bodies.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe it was a bit of that.
Maybe he smelled a burning fade. Maybe he literally knows what a burnt Halfman smells like from living in the Borderlands and burning a couple himself.
Probably. I wouldn't put it past him.
There it is. He grimaced the way he had in the square. I can still smell him everywhere.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. I still read that as like the fact that he was there and then is now gone. That he left traces behind that Lan is still picking up on.
Did we get confirmation, or do we at some point get confirmation that Thom actually killed that Fade, or did he just fight him off?
I can't remember. I can't imagine him fighting off a Fade and the Fade just letting him go again.
Yeah, he has to have killed him.
Especially if he got a wound that caused a limp, like he wouldn't be running away. Don't know.
I am going to go with he killed the Fade and the townspeople burned him, and they all stood around that fire saying, let no one talk of this ever again. Hence, everyone lied.
Well, that's a legit theory, Vil. I mean, the fact that everyone's telling different stories might just be because no one wants to own up to what the truth is. And the truth might be that everyone saw this dead body produced by Thom with no eyes.
Yeah.
And that they wouldn't just bury that. Burning it makes sense. So, I mean, it straight up could be the fact that, they are so rattled by the fact that they found this eyeless man in their village and had to burn him that everyone is telling these completely disparate stories about what happened. And none of the stories adding up to what. I also don't know why buildings were burnt. Was it from the mob? And was it Gelb? Did Gelb incite the mobs? Because the mob went down to the docks, but the spray had just left. So I got the sense it was sort of Gelb trying to provoke people into violence, and that violence was eventually directed towards the spray.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got a predisposition to being angry and aggressive, and then that dark evilness pulls into your town, it just sort of puts you on board like, yep, let's get on.
Maybe just took advantage of that situation, to incite some violence and get his vengeance. Like, hey, he has an opportunity. Let's burn some shit. And that boat. Let's go.
Burn stuff.
Burn the Whitebridge.
I had a bit of a chuckle at Nynaeve's like it's her inner monologue when she's talking, or she's thinking about how they're traveling towards Whitebridge, and we know that Lan doesn't talk. Sometimes he doesn't say a dozen words in a day, right? So Lan is dead quiet. Moiraine is described as being Nynaeve's own description of Moiraine is that she's as calm as a pond, and at times she also refers to the times where she's shouting. So you've got Lan, stoic, doesn't say a word. Moiraine, calm as a pond. And Nynaeve riding along, the three of them on horses, Nynaeve shouting at the top of her lungs, like there's no other sound around. It's just Nynaeve raving at them like a crazy person, and the two of them just like, Tarvalon, we'll talk when we get to Tarvalon.
Yeah.
You're done shouting now?
Here we are, Trollocs. Here we are.
And you can also, obviously, you can see, Villy, you hinted at it, like the sort of blossoming emotional bond between Nynaeve and Lan, like how she gets especially embarrassed by him, and like how she doesn't want him to see the two of them dueling because she's losing, and all that sort of stuff is becoming pretty obvious.
The closing of that chapter is basically her inner Onet cursing Moiraine like, light burn you.
Yeah. Nynaeve, love her.
there was a photo on Instagram or something of the actress playing Nynaeve, and someone took a photo of her like out of character, I suppose, just looking, and she's got this glare in her eyes looking at the cameraman like a paparazzi, and someone going, this casting is fucking brilliant, like she's 100% Nynaeve.
I'm gonna go look for that.
Look at that photo. I commented on it. I think it was on Facebook actually. Yeah, anyway.
Okay.
Like the only problem with that was she didn't have a braid and she wasn't tugging on it, but otherwise that face, yeah.
Where was her arms folded?
Yeah, not beneath her breasts
In
either.
relation to her breasts, yes.
She didn't need any of that. She just needed that look on her face, and it was totally
Yeah.
100% Nynaeve. Like, well done.
Amazing.
Right
Yep, straightforward. The three of them obviously get to Whitebridge and then move along. It's basically just setting the timeline, right? So, okay, Rand, Matt, and Thom passed through Whitebridge 2 days before Nynaeve, Moiraine, and Lan showed up. And then they set a course they hit the Camelin Road, right?
Yeah, Camelin Road, but heading north. They're going in the direction of the token. Like, I can feel the one boy.
Okay,
Let's go.
yes.
And they don't know that it's Rand and Matt. They just know it's two boys, and they also don't know that Thom was there at all.
No, they don't. Matt and Rand are just they're traveling due east. Camelin is due east,
yes,
from Whitebridge. So Matt and Rand are traveling along the Camelin Road. I guess Moiraine and Lan and Nynaeve are also traveling along that road, because in the next chapter you actually get to find out how far along Egwene and Perrin and Elyas are, based on the statue you mentioned in our first recording, Will, or in our second recording, when we spoke about the map that had Arthur Hawkwing's statue on it. It's halfway. It's halfway. Well, we might as well start with the next chapter.
Yeah, I suppose. Just jump into it. Halfway through the book, they're halfway on their journey. Well done.
Well, I mean, Egwene, Perrin, and Elyas are halfway between Whitebridge and Camelin already.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the very next chapter.
Elyas is pushing a hard pace, and we'll get into that.
He is.
Yes.
Okay, so do tell us about that hard pace, Joe.
Chapter 29, Eyes Without Pity. I wrote instinctively Eyes Without Mercy, and then went, oh, wait, but same thing. So anyway, we pick up with Elyas and Perrin and Egwene after they left the Tinkers. And now, because of that dream that Perrin had when he was with the Tinkers, Elyas is very, very uncomfortable. And he knows something is coming, but he doesn't know what. He just knows he needs to get the hell out of here as fast as he possibly can. And he's super, super cautious. And this is where we see his water training coming into action, because they're running between little copses of trees, I suppose, little outcrops and hills. And he's scrambling on his belly. He's making them wait behind. And then he will like do leopard crawling up the side of a hill and just take off his hat and peek his eyes over to see what's next, and then make sure the coast is clear. Okay, then call the next guys. And this for me, I was nauseous during this whole chapter, because it was just totally stressful. Like running and hiding and stopping, and running and hiding and stopping. Okay, come. And then just going around hills and trying to stick to the tree lines. And when they couldn't, they were being uber careful. It was really, really, because then when they're doing that, they start seeing these, I say swarms, but they should be flocks, a murder of crows.
Good on
technically.
you.
Yes.
And chasing and looking for something, so they know, okay, well, and that's probably going back to that in the dream where that crow or raven, whatever, poked him in the eye, that we see this again. And now these ravens are in full force out there, flying around, hundreds of them at a time, and they're darting in. And this is one scene where a fox runs out of the tree line, and the ravens see it and swarm around it in circles and peck it to death and rip its entrails out and leave it. They don't eat it. They just mutilate it and leave it in a pile and then fly away again. And later on in the book, even when Egwene thinks about that, she vomits off the side of Bella. She's on a horse, and she just the thought of it makes her sick. So they're thinking, when they see that, they think, holy shit! If we get caught by these things, they're gonna peck us. Peck the meat off our bones. And I wrote here in my notes, air piranhas. So someone should make a movie, Air Piranhas, something like Sharknado. I don't know. Get on it, someone. J.J. Abrams. You don't need to even finish the story. Just start. So Yeah, they're slinking over the hills, and they're trying to get. And Elyas is saying, "Look, I don't know what's coming or what's going to happen, but I know a safe place, so we'll go there." And that's what they're doing. They're just trying to get there as fast as they can. And Elyas is pushing a hard pace, and he's giving them crap about, like, I thought you farmers were like work all day and dance all night, but you sleep all day and sleep all night. You can't keep up with this old man. So yeah, they eventually, as they're running, and one of the crows or ravens or whatever turns around and sees them, and Perrin sees it, gets his sling out, and before he's even put a stone in it, the thing crumples up and falls out of the air. And he turns around, and it's Egwene. She's also got a sling. She had the stone in it and killed the raven before Perrin could even get there. So that's, again, these kids can really take care of themselves. It's not just the boys that are
Was it
trained in
Egwene? I
this.
thought it was Elyas.
No, it was Egwene,
No, it
as
was
far as
Egwene.
I can remember. Yeah.
Wow, nice one.
Elyas took out a pheasant on their travels with a bow
Yes,
before
with a bow, yeah.
Perrin could
Yeah, I don't
get
think he has a
his
sling,
out.
but he tells them
No.
afterwards, like, "Hey, keep those slings handy. We might need them again." That was a
Yeah.
good shot. Like, glad to be with you guys. So yeah, he's pushing them hard to get to this safe place. And after a while, they're just completely out of breath, and they're running through this field, and they got nowhere to go. There's no place to hide. It's all open, and suddenly they get this tingling all over their bodies as they cross this imaginary line. And they all just stop and like, whoa, what the hell was that? And we get our first sight of a steading, of an Ogier steading. And finally they're safe. And that's where we learn that, for example, steadings, Aes Sedai don't like them because they can't channel, they can't even touch the true source.
Can't sense it.
They can't even sense it. They don't even, they're completely cut off. Dark Shadowspawn won't enter it. The crows will definitely not fly into it, but they'll still be able to see them if they're in the air.
Yes.
So let's get to some hiding place. And that's when they make it down to this area where there's these big stones covered in moss and lichen and stuff. So they make a fire next to it, where obviously many fires have been made before. They comment on the charred edge of the stone. And then when they're looking at the stone a little bit longer and more carefully, it turns out to be a big eye. And this is where we get the story about Arthur Hawkwing's statue that they built for him, and that he used to control. He took over the world as we know it, from the Arathosian to the spine of the world, and there was peace and prosperity in the land, kind of like a second age of legends, except it was enforced by strict laws and death by sword if you broke any of the laws. Like they were mentioning thing like a child could carry a bag of gold across the entire length of the continent without ever being harassed at any point. So yeah, it was very safe, but it came at a violent cost. And and then he wanted to. That's why Arthur Hawkwing wanted to make the city. He wanted to make his grand city that wasn't connected to anything else in the center of the continent, in that steading, so that he could get away from Aes Sedai. No one could mess with him. And the first thing they did was build this big statue. And the day that they raised that statue is the day that he died. So either some say that someone poisoned him or he fell ill, but he was in the middle of a battle. He had besieged Tar Valon for 20 years. The Aes Sedai had been trapped inside because he hated Channels.
Hated them.
As we find out a little bit later, his his followers, his descendants, are even worse than him.
Yeah.
So yeah, and basically that's just how it ends, with them sitting around the campfire, talking about these legends and how he ruled and how he died, and the statue that eventually people tore it down after a while. It didn't collapse over time. They didn't even get to build the city. They put up the statue, and that was it. And that's how that chapter ends as well. Just taking a break in the steading after being chased by.
Is tiring. It is.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that scene where in Lord of the Rings, where they're just running and running and running over these very much the same sort of hills, no trees, and then hiding from the crows and just
that is the sound of crows.
I had completely forgotten about this chapter, that this ever happened. And it is just, I mean, you get these little pauses that we call out every now and then, where like you ease the tension a little bit. They get to Baerlon and they go to an inn, and they make a camp here or there. But I mean, it is just a fade, then Trollocs, then Drakkar, then Dark Friends, then Children of the Light, then more fades, another Drakkar. It's just like constant hunting and pursuit. And like you were saying before, Joe, like why Egwene would be so stoked to just be chilling out with the Tinkers and dancing and having fun, because
Yeah.
it's harrowing, and this chapter epitomizes that as well,
Yeah.
because it is so like these birds have, I mean, an obvious vantage point. They're high in the sky. They can easily see. There's barely any cover. They only have one horse. You know, they are scrambling to get from cover to cover, and it is just relentless. Like the way that they tie it out by the end of it is just, it's rough.
Also, what I forgot to mention, super important part of this chapter, the wolves and Perrin's connection to them, because the wolves are running around in the forest about a mile away from all of them, and Perrin can sense them being attacked by the crows, and they're kind of like drawing the crows away from them, and being bitten and pecked at and bleeding and just biting and jumping in the air, and Perrin can taste the blood in his mouth and the feathers from when the wolves are attacking it.
Perrin said, "Why didn't the wolves warn us about the crows?" That was also sort of the first one of the giveaways there, that now he's like feeling them. And Elyas said, "Well, it's not in their nature to look up in trees."
Yeah.
And they sort of say, look up. It's that's
And this is where he first admits that he feels that he admits it to Egwene, and she's like, "You can feel them, you know?
You can, yeah.
It's
and no escaping that anymore.
No, bro. And so that's that point where he has that connection, and Elyas as well senses it, because they both look at each other at the same time when they get that message from the wolves. So he's like, "All right, you don't want to admit it, but I know you can communicate."
Elyas looks at him, waiting for him to say something, like,
but
you know, right? Yeah, say it. And then he does, and Egwene's like, "Oh shit, he's right, you can." So good.
Yo, I'm sweating now just telling that story. I feel like I've run through all those hills.
It's hectic that while they are running and Perrin is coming to grips with the fact that they might not make it, he's asking himself, will he have the fortitude to actually mercy kill Egwene to spare her being torn apart by these crows? That is hectic stuff.
And when they're camping at the end, he thinks about it, because she makes a joke or something. She's being lighthearted, and he looks at her and smiles, and then immediately remembers, like, "Oh shit, like 5 minutes ago I was ready to kill you with my axe. Mercy kill you." I mean, nonetheless. But
well, I mean, how harrowing would it be to see a flock of crows, a murder of them, murdering a fox out of fun, like pecking out its eyes and entrails, and then going off, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're going to do to you, and them thinking, there's hundreds of them. How is it going to feel to be pecked to death by crows?
Yeah. It's not as worse than pecked to death with my axe, so which is just going to be one, quick swipe.
One pecking.
One pecking.
Just one peck.
Mercy pecking.
I also, for the first time, paying attention to things about Arthur Hawkwing, trying to find links with the Sean-Chan. When they're talking about Arthur Hawkwing here and his hatred of the Aes Sedai, I just remembered that when we started this again, we noted how Ishmael was claiming responsibility for poisoning Arthur Hawkwing's opinion of the Aes Sedai. He says to Lews Therin in Dragonmount in the prologue, he says to him, "I'm the one that convinced Arthur Hawkwing that the Aes Sedai are bad news and that he should go after them," which is pretty cool for Ishmael if that is in fact the case. But he certainly did claim that.
Yeah,
and basically brought about the entire social structure for the Sean-Chan based around subjugating people they can channel.
Yeah, I mean, we get into some heavy shit, but look, he is a giant dark friend asshole, so he's just a liar.
He's like the dark's best friend.
Yeah, indeed. Can we trust the word he says?
No.
No. His best friend is the father of lies.
Literally,
I wouldn't call them best friends. Maybe he thinks they're best friends. He's just a tool.
Eventually, he's Nameless. He's 2IC, second in charge.
Yeah, but I mean, even Nameless, one mistake and you're a dead man. Like, you know,
true. Yeah,
there's plenty more Nameless where you came from.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else from that? I mean, I was sort of hoping that, like, Steading, cool. Are we going to meet Loyal here? No,
it hasn't been an Ogier there for 3,000 years. They mentioned in that chapter.
Yeah, when he says that, I'm like, oh man,
damn it. Well, they've already cast him, so he's coming in season 1.
He's coming in the next next cast.
This could be a spot, for
Mm.
them to sort of truncate this, or not truncate, but like condense the story a little bit. Like this first steading could be the steading where they meet Loyal.
Yeah. Hey, look, if we can read this entire book in 10 hours, that's 10 one-hour episodes. That's one season. You can put everything in. You have no excuse. Jenkins, whatever his name is. What's his name, Moritz?
Rafe Judkins.
Rafe Judkins, yes. You have no
There's,
excuse.
I hold the belief that there's a lot of descriptive stuff that the visual and the settings will do automatically. And if you cut all of that text out of it that you just quickly read with your eyes, then by all means, they can completely do it.
We're dancing around the fact, but what I've certainly found from this go through is that there is a lot of fast-paced action. Like, I mean, there's a lot of story happening all the time, and a large chunk of that is everyone together. Like, you can't cut any of that out, really. So I'm pleasantly surprised by how much of the story I think will actually be able to make it into the show, which is relevant and entertaining. Where previously I sort of resigned myself to the fact that, I mean, they'll probably follow the three main characters and cut virtually everything else out. But at least at this stage of the story, they can leave quite a lot of it in.
I think you're setting yourself up for major disappointment, Moritz. I think after season 1 finishes, there's going to be another podcast of anger.
Hey, we can do that.
Recap podcast. What did we think after this?
Hey, we'll talk.
Yeah. I mean, look, I know similarities, but anyway, Game of Thrones season 1 was pretty faithful. I liked season 1 a lot. And then it just quickly went to shit after that until eventually it was a big steaming pile of shit. So yeah, you never know.
Quite.
Let's hope they can keep that momentum going.
Yeah, again, fingers crossed. Okay, should we dip into favorite moments? Willem, why don't you go?
One time, Maiden of the Spears, little tidbit that came out of the waste.
Yeah, okay,
that is
cool.
a very big one, and for me now, finally understanding a lot of the little pictures and everything in there, it was a big one for me. That was a good one.
Yeah, that is cool. I mean, just reading those words as well, because they put up on such a pedestal as well, the Maidens of the Spear. To read about them in book 1, read that Rand's mom was one. It's very cool. How about you, Joe?
Tom, barreling into that fade, like when the whole setup, when he's still in the alley and he's talking about his nephew Owen, and the boys can see tears in his eyes, like he's getting all emotional, and he looks to those boys as like a surrogate uncle. And then when he sees that fade, he instantaneously turns around and shoves his bag of of Gleam and stuff in Rand's arms and says, "Run, Camelin, go now!" And then just wah!
His most prized possessions.
Fly, you fools!
Yeah,
and fly, you fools! And off he goes in, like without hesitation. And we leave him behind. You're like, Tom, no. But, yeah.
I mean, I wish I'd written down on a piece of paper, Jody is going to choose Tom tackling a fade, and held it up right now. But I knew that you would.
Yes.
Which is why I didn't choose that moment.
Because that was your one too. I was hoping you would ask me first because I knew you would take it if I didn't go.
It is such a great one.
Yeah.
But mine was not so much a moment, but it is in chapter 25, the traveling people. There's a lot of descriptions of Elyas. Because this is now shortly after Egwene and Perrin have met him. And a couple of things they say is that at one point, Egwene, when they've just started traveling together, Egwene tries to tell Elyas that he needs to ride on the horse. And he looks at her with these these wolf eyes and this deadpan expression on his face. And he just says no. And Perrin notices Egwene's reaction to that. And as he turns around, he can swear that Elyas is like grinning or like laughing internally. He skewers a rabbit at 20 paces with a knife.
Yeah.
He what Willie mentioned before, he shoots a pheasant that's on the wing. So like with a bow and arrow, he's shooting a flying pheasant. He does the whole whistling thing with the mastiffs, and then later, when everyone's sitting on like the stumps and stuff around the fire, Elyas is lying on the ground
Yeah.
like a wolf. It's just like he doesn't take instruction from anyone. He just rocks face
Yeah.
wherever he is at any moment.
That scene with Egwene is when
Yeah.
he tells her, "I said no, girl," and she backs up with looking in his face. Her mouth is open to form words, but she says nothing, and she walks backwards until she gets to Bella and climbs on.
Yes, she walked backwards into the horse.
And the whole time
Yeah.
he's just staring at her in silence.
But doesn't he also then say, plus I think the horse is just as afraid of me as the horse is of the wolves.
Well, they describe Bella as being afraid of him as well. So yes, definitely. But it's so great that he is such a badass.
And yeah, he does give a grin after that. Perrin notices it. Like he's hardcore. Like I said no, but he's just fucking with her a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, I think that's it for this episode. If anyone wants to get in contact with us, please go to our website, which is just bloodandashespodcast.com. You can send us messages through there, or you can just email me directly at Moritz, that's MORITZ, at bloodandashespodcast.com. We welcome any and all feedback, and we just want to hear what you guys think.
Especially pronunciations.
Maybe that would be the only thing I would say not to email them.
Yes.
The
And just-
internet only has so many tubes.
They get blocked. So
Yes.
indeed, really, we should, as an admin point of view, change that email address to Bella at Blood and I'm not even joking, because Moritz is difficult to
Bella
spell people.
at bella@bella.com.
Exactly.
1 L.
Next week we will cover chapters 30 to 35. So Children of Shadow to the end of chapter 35, Camelin.
We're getting somewhere.
We are really getting somewhere. We're really getting into the meat of this thing.
I was looking at that next chapter, Children of Shadow, and that's the Children of the Light symbol for that chapter.
It is.
So why is it called Children of Shadow?
Perrin and Egwene are going to encounter old Bornholds sometime soon.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
cunts in the story, eh? It's like everywhere.
Yes, everywhere, as far as the eye can see. That's for the next episode. So on that note, I will say good evening to you, gentlemen, and see everyone else later.
Good afternoon,
Thank you.
folks. Cheerio.
Good Spanish afternoon. See ya.
Laters.